Jake Morrison knew something was wrong the moment he woke up. The ground beneath him felt cold and metallic, not like the soft forest floor where he had made camp the night before. His head pounded as he slowly opened his eyes and found himself staring at a ceiling made of strange blue metal that seemed to glow with its own light. He sat up quickly, his marine training kicking in as he scanned his surroundings. This was not the Montana wilderness where he had been leading a survival camping trip with 6 college students. Instead, he found himself in what looked like a massive forest, but something felt wrong about everything around him. The trees were too perfect, the grass too green, and the sky above had an odd purple tint that made his skin crawl. Jake checked his gear and found that most of it was gone. His rifle, GPS, radio, and emergency beacon had all disappeared. Only his knife, some basic camping supplies, and his backpack remained. Someone or something had taken him from his campsite and brought him to this strange place. As he stood up and began to explore, Jake heard voices coming from deeper in the forest. He moved carefully toward the sound, using the stealth skills he had learned during his years as a sniper in the Marines. Through the trees, he saw 2 people sitting by a small fire, talking in hushed tones. The first was a woman with dark hair who looked to be in her 30s. She wore the uniform of a park ranger, but it was torn and dirty. The second was a man with gray hair and tired eyes who kept looking around nervously as if expecting danger at any moment. Jake approached them slowly with his hands, visible to show he meant no harm. The woman spotted him first and immediately reached for a sharpened stick beside her. The man jumped to his feet and grabbed a rock. "Easy there," Jake said softly. "I think we might be in the same situation." The woman studied him for a moment before lowering her makeshift weapon. "You just got here, didn't you?" she said. It was not a question. "My name is Jake Morrison. I was camping in Montana with some students when I blacked out. Now I wake up in this place that looks like a forest, but feels all wrong." The woman nodded grimly. "I'm Lisa Rodriguez. I used to be a park ranger before they took me. This is Pete Collins. He was an engineer in the Army." Pete sat back down by the fire, but kept the rock in his hand. "How long have you been here?" Jake asked. 2 weeks, Lisa replied. "Pete has been here for a month. We're not the first, and we won't be the last. What is this place?" Lisa and Pete exchanged a look before Pete spoke up. "It's a hunting ground." "But we're not the hunters." Jake felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean?" "The things that brought us here call themselves the Cathara," Lisa explained. "They look like giant lizards that walk on 2 legs. They have technology that's far beyond anything humans have ever seen. They've been taking people from Earth for years and bringing them here to hunt for sport." "Hunt for sport," Jake repeated, his mind struggling to process the information. "That's right," Pete said. "They give us basic supplies and a day to get ready. Then they come after us with weapons and tracking devices. Most people who get brought here are dead within a week." Jake looked around the forest again with new eyes. Now he could see that some of the trees had small devices attached to them that were probably cameras. The grass showed signs of being artificially maintained. Even the rocks seemed to be placed in specific patterns. "How many of them are there?" he asked. "Usually 5 or 6 in each hunting party," Lisa said. "They're big, maybe 8 feet tall, and they're fast. Their weapons shoot some kind of energy beam that can cut through trees. They have armor that stops anything we can throw at them. But you 2 are still alive. We hide," Pete said. "We run when they get close. We avoid the open areas where they can see us easily. It's not really living, just staying alive one more day." Jake nodded, but his mind was already working on a different approach. He had spent years in the military, learning how to fight enemies with better equipment and more resources. The key was never to fight them on their terms, A loud horn sound echoed through the forest, making all three humans freeze. The sound was deep and haunting, like nothing Jake had ever heard before. "What was that?" he asked. Lisa's face went pale. "That's the hunting horn. It means a new hunt is starting. It means they're coming for us right now." Pete was already grabbing his few belongings and preparing to run. "We need to move. They give us exactly 24 hours from when that horn sounds. After that, they start tracking us." Jake picked up his backpack, but instead of following Pete and Lisa as they headed deeper into the forest, he stopped and looked back in the direction they had come from, while his companions were focused on running and hiding. Jake was thinking about something entirely different. For 3 years, these alien hunters had been taking humans and killing them for entertainment. They had grown comfortable with the idea that humans would always run and hide. They expected their prey to be afraid and desperate. But Jake Morrison had spent his entire adult life learning how to kill enemies who thought they were superior. As Pete and Lisa disappeared into the trees ahead of him, Jake smiled grimly and began planning something that no human had ever attempted in this place before. The aliens wanted to hunt humans for sport. It was time to show them what happened when the humans decided to hunt back. Jake followed Lisa and Pete deeper into the artificial forest, but his mind was focused on gathering intelligence rather than simply running away. Every step he took, every tree he passed, every sound he heard was being cataloged and analyzed with the precision of a trained soldier. The forest was large, probably several miles across, but Jake could see that it had boundaries. In the distance through the trees, he caught glimpses of metal walls that rose up toward the strange purple sky. This was not a planet they were on, but some kind of massive space station or artificial habitat. As they moved, Jake began asking Lisa and Pete detailed questions about their captors. He wanted to know everything about the Kithara hunting patterns, their weapons, their behavior, and most importantly, their weaknesses. "They always hunt during what they call daylight hours," Lisa explained as they crouched behind a fallen log to rest. "The lights in the sky dim every 12 hours to simulate night and day. During the dark period, they return to their base." "Where is their base?" Jake asked. Pete pointed toward the eastern edge of the forest. "There's a building made of the same blue metal as everything else. It's about 2 miles that way. They have vehicles that hover above the ground and weapons that can hit targets from very long distances." Jake nodded and filed away this information. "What about their hunting style? Do they work together or separately?" "Usually they split up into pairs," Lisa said. "They use some kind of communication device to talk to each other. When one finds tracks or signs of humans, the others come running. They like to make noise when they hunt," Pete added. "They roar and shout in their language. I think they enjoy scaring their prey before they kill them." This was exactly the kind of information Jake needed. Enemies who made noise were enemies who could be tracked. Enemies who worked in small groups could be isolated and picked off one at a time. As the artificial night fell and the lights in the sky dimmed, Jake convinced Lisa and Pete to move closer to the Kithara base. He wanted to observe the aliens. When they thought they were safe and unguarded, they crept through the darkened forest until they could see the alien building in the distance. It was larger than Pete had indicated, probably big enough to house 50 or more of the creatures. Blue light leaked from windows that were placed too high for human eyes to see through. Jake settled into a position behind some rocks and began his surveillance. Lisa and Pete wanted to leave, but he convinced them to stay by pointing out that knowledge about their enemies could mean the difference between life and death. For hours, Jake watched the building and gradually began to understand the alien routine. Guards patrolled the perimeter, but they followed the same path every time and seemed bored with their duty. Vehicles came and went through a large entrance on the south side. Most importantly, Jake saw that the aliens removed their armor and weapons. When they entered the building dot just before dawn, Jake witnessed something that changed everything. A group of 6 Cathara emerged from the building, wearing hunting gear and carrying weapons. But these were not the same creatures that had been hunting humans for years. These aliens moved differently, talked differently, and carried themselves like inexperienced amateurs rather than skilled predators. "Those are not soldiers," Jake whispered to himself. Lisa heard him and crawled closer. "What do you mean? Look at how they walk. Look at how they hold their weapons. Those are rich kids playing at being hunters. They've never faced anything that fought back." As Jake watched the hunting party move into the forest, he began to see patterns that confirmed his suspicions. The aliens were overconfident, careless about their noise levels, and completely unprepared for any kind of organized resistance. Leader of the group was a young Cathara who kept gesturing dramatically and speaking loudly to his companions. Jake could not understand their language, but the body language was unmistakable. This was someone trying to impress his friends with his hunting skills. "The young one is their prince, or something like that," Pete said. "I've seen him before. He always tries to be the first one to find humans. The others follow him around like he's their leader." Jake smiled grimly as he watched Prince Zethric stride confidently through the forest. Arrogant leaders made for easy targets, especially when they cared more about showing off than staying alive. Over the next several hours, Jake continued his observation of the hunting party, while Lisa and Pete grew increasingly nervous about staying so close to danger. The aliens moved through the forest with all the stealth of a parade, breaking branches, stepping on dry leaves, and talking constantly among themselves. When the hunting party finally found the campsite where the 3 humans had spent the previous night, Jake was able to study their tracking methods. The Kithara had devices that could detect human scent and body heat, but they seemed to rely entirely on their technology rather than developing any natural hunting instincts. "They're completely dependent on their gadgets," Jake murmured as he watched the aliens wave their scanning devices around like magic wands. The most important discovery came when Jake observed how the aliens reacted to finding an empty campsite. Instead of spreading out to search for tracks or signs of where the humans had gone, they clustered together and argued about which direction to go next. Their technology could tell them that humans had been in the area, but it could not tell them where those humans had gone. As the hunting party moved away from the campsite and deeper into the forest, Jake made his decision. He had learned enough about his enemies to know that they could be beaten. The Kithara had superior weapons and technology, but they lacked the tactical knowledge and combat experience that Jake had spent years developing. "We need to go back," Lisa said urgently. They could return at any time, but Jake was already planning his first strike against the aliens. He had identified their weaknesses, learned their patterns, and most importantly, he had realized that they expected humans to run and hide rather than fight back. That afternoon, while Lisa and Pete set up a new hiding place deeper in the forest, Jake began preparing his first trap. Using his military engineering knowledge and the materials available in the forest, he started constructing something that would turn the hunters into the hunted. The Cathara wanted to play a hunting game with humans as their prey. Jake Morrison was about to teach them a new set of rules. Jake spent the next morning carefully preparing his trap while Lisa and Pete watched nervously from a safe distance. He had chosen a narrow path between 2 large rocks where the hunting party would be forced to walk single file. Using branches, rocks, and his military knife, he constructed a concealed pit that would be invisible until someone stepped on it. The trap was simple but effective. When triggered, it would send the victim falling into a hole lined with sharpened stakes. Jake had learned this technique during survival training, but he had never expected to use it against alien hunters on a space station. "This is insane," Pete whispered as Jake put the finishing touches on his deadfall. "If you kill one of them, the others will come after us with everything they have." "They're already coming after us with everything they have," Jake replied calmly. "The difference is that now we're going to start fighting back." Lisa shook her head. "You don't understand what these things are capable of. Their weapons can cut through solid rock. Their armor can stop bullets. Even if your trap works, you'll just make them angry." Jake finished camouflaging the pit and stepped back to admire his work. "Good. Angry enemies make mistakes." That afternoon, the hunting party returned to the area where they had lost the human trail the day before. Jake watched from his concealed position as Prince Jethrak led his companions toward the trap with all the confidence of someone who had never faced real danger. The young alien prince was gesturing dramatically and speaking loudly in his harsh language when he stepped directly onto Jake's concealed pit. The carefully balanced covering gave way, and Prince Jethrak plunged down onto the sharpened stakes with a scream that echoed through the forest. The other 5 Kithara immediately rushed to help their leader, but Prince Jethrak was already dead. The wooden stakes had punched through his hunting gear and into his chest. His companions stared in shock at the first Kithara to die in the arena. In over 3 years, Jake did not wait around to see their reaction. He had already planned his escape route and was moving through the forest before the aliens realized they were under attack. But he could hear their roars of rage and confusion echoing behind him as they discovered that their prey had become a predator. When Jake rejoined Lisa and Pete at their hiding spot, both of them stared at him with a mixture of fear and amazement. "You actually did it," Lisa said quietly. "You killed one of them." "That was just the beginning," Jake replied. He was already planning his next move. The death of Prince Jethrak sent shockwaves through the Kithara base. Jake could hear the aliens roaring and arguing, even from a distance of several miles. Vehicles flew overhead, scanning the forest with searchlights. The casual hunting expedition had suddenly become a serious military operation, but Jake had expected this reaction and was prepared for it. Over the next 2 days he struck again, using different tactics each time. He rigged a deadfall. That crushed a Kithara scout who was tracking human footprints. He used a snare trap to hang another alien hunter from a tree branch. Each kill was carefully planned to cause maximum psychological impact on the surviving hunters. The Kithara were learning that their prey could be dangerous, but they had no idea how to respond to guerrilla warfare tactics. Their technology was designed to track and kill fleeing humans, not to defend against organized attacks by someone who understood how to use the environment as a weapon. Jake's third kill came when he managed to isolate a lone Kithara who had separated from his hunting partner. Using a technique he had learned during his sniper training, Jake waited motionless for hours until the alien walked within striking distance. A single thrust of his knife into the creature's neck dropped it silently to the ground. But this kill was different because Jake was able to study the alien's equipment before disposing of the body. The Kithara carried weapons that fired concentrated energy beams, but the weapons had limited charges and took time to recharge between shots. Their armor was strong, but had weak points at the joints where mobility was more important than protection. Most importantly, Jake discovered that each Kithara carried a communication device that allowed them to talk to their base and to each other. He spent hours studying the device until he figured out how to monitor their conversations without being detected. Listening to the alien communications gave Jake insights into their psychology and tactics that no human had ever possessed. The Kithara were becoming frustrated and frightened by the unexpected resistance. They had started arguing among themselves about how to handle the situation. Commander Vorthik, the leader of the arena, was demanding that the remaining hunters track down and kill the humans immediately. But the hunters were now afraid to split up or venture into areas where they might be ambushed. The easy sport they had expected had turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse. Jake shared this intelligence with Lisa and Pete, who were beginning to see that their situation might not be hopeless after all. "They're scared," Lisa said with amazement. "The mighty Kithara hunters are actually scared of us." "They should be," Jake replied grimly, "because this is just getting started." On the fourth night after Prince Zethrak's death, Jake made his most daring move yet. He crept close to the Kithara base and studied their security procedures. The aliens had doubled their guards and were using motion sensors to detect intruders, but they were still thinking like hunters rather than soldiers. Jake managed to plant several small explosive devices that he had, constructed using materials from the forest and components from alien equipment he had captured. The explosions would not destroy the base, but they would send a clear message that nowhere was safe from human retaliation. When the bombs went off just before dawn, the entire Kithara base erupted in chaos. Alarms sounded and aliens ran in all directions trying to find the source of the attack. But Jake was already miles away, planning his next strike. The psychological effect of the bombing was exactly what Jake had hoped for. The Kithara realized that they were no longer hunting defenseless prey, but fighting an enemy who could strike back at any time and any place. Commander Vorthik sent an urgent message to the Kithara homeworld requesting military reinforcements. The message that Jake intercepted revealed something crucial about his enemies. The arena was considered a minor entertainment facility, not an important military installation. The Kithara government was reluctant to commit serious resources to what they saw as a small local problem. This gave Jake hope that he might actually be able to win this war. If he could make the cost of running the arena too high, the Kithara might decide to abandon the facility entirely. But first, he needed to find and rescue any other humans who were being held prisoner. The war was just beginning, and Jake intended to make sure that every human who could fight would have the chance to strike back against their alien captors. Jake's discovery of the prison section came by accident while he was monitoring Kithara communications during one of their patrols. He overheard guards discussing the movement of fresh stock to the holding areas where humans were kept before, being released into the hunting grounds. Following the communication, signals led Jake to a section of the arena he had never seen before. Hidden behind artificial mountains was a large building with heavy security where the Kithara stored their human prisoners between hunts. Jake spent 2 days studying the prison facility from a distance. Unlike the hunting preserve with its fake forest and relaxed atmosphere, this area was heavily guarded with patrols, sensors, and automated weapons. The Kithara clearly took security seriously when it came to keeping their prey from escaping before the hunt began. But Jake had learned enough about alien technology and tactics to spot the weaknesses in their defenses. The guards followed predictable patterns. The sensors had blind spots, and the automated weapons were programmed to target escaping prisoners rather than attacking enemies coming from outside. On the third night, Jake made his move. Using the stealth techniques he had perfected during his sniper training, he approached the prison facility during the shift change when the guards were distracted. The alien security systems were designed to keep humans in, not to keep trained. Soldiers out, Jake disabled 2 guards silently using his knife and took their weapons and communication devices. The energy weapons were heavier than human firearms, but they packed enough power to punch through Kithara armor at close range. Inside the prison facility, Jake found dozens of humans locked in small cells. Most of them were in poor condition after weeks or months of captivity, but a few looked like they still had fight left in them. The first person Jake freed was Dr. Amy Carter, a military psychologist who had been captured while working at a remote research station in Alaska. Despite her weeks in captivity, she immediately understood what Jake was trying to accomplish and began helping him identify which prisoners would be most useful in a fight. "We need people with military or survival training," Amy whispered as they moved through the prison corridors. "The others are too traumatized or physically weak to be effective fighters right away." Jake found exactly what he was looking for in Carlos Silva, a former Special Forces explosives expert who had been captured just 3 days earlier while hiking in Colorado. Carlos was angry, alert, and ready to kill aliens with his bare hands if necessary. "How many of these bastards are there?" Carlos asked as Jake cut through his restraints. "Too many to fight head-on," Jake replied. "But not too many to beat if we're smart about it." The three of them freed 8 more prisoners who looked capable of handling weapons and following orders under pressure. The rest would have to wait until they could establish a secure base of operations somewhere in the arena. Getting out of the prison facility proved easier than getting in, because Jake now had alien weapons and the element of surprise. When guards tried to stop the escaping humans, Carlos and Dr. Carter proved that they knew how to use the captured energy weapons effectively. The escape triggered every alarm in the facility, but by the time Cathara reinforcements arrived, Jake and his team were already disappearing into the artificial wilderness with enough weapons and equipment to arm a small army. Commander Vorthic's response was swift and brutal. He ordered his remaining hunters to scour every inch of the arena until they found the human resistance group. But Jake had anticipated this reaction and was ready for it. Instead of trying to hide from the massive search operation, Jake split his team into small groups and began a coordinated series of attacks on Cathara patrols and supply lines. The aliens found themselves fighting on multiple fronts against enemies who knew the terrain better than they did. Dr. Carter proved invaluable in analyzing Cathara psychology and behavior patterns. She helped Jake understand that the aliens were pack hunters who became confused and ineffective when separated from their groups. This knowledge allowed the human resistance to develop tactics that turned Cathara's own instincts against them. Carlos used his demolitions expertise to sabotage the arena's infrastructure and create improvised explosive devices from alien technology. The Cathara had never faced an enemy who could turn their own equipment into weapons, and they had no defenses against attacks on their power systems and communications networks. The psychological warfare tactics that Dr. Carter suggested proved especially effective. The humans began leaving messages written in alien blood at the sites of their attacks. They arranged the bodies of dead Cathara in positions that conveyed specific threats and promises of future violence. Within a week, the Cathara base was in chaos. Guards refused to patrol alone. Hunters demanded military escorts before entering the forest, and Commander Vorthik was receiving daily demands from his superiors for explanations about why a simple hunting preserve had turned into a war zone. Jake's most ambitious operation came when Carlos discovered that the arena's communication array could be used to send messages beyond the station. Working together, they managed to override the system's security protocols and broadcast a signal toward Earth. The message was simple but devastating to Cathara's secrecy. Jake identified himself as a captured human and revealed the existence of the alien hunting operation. He provided coordinates for the arena's location and warned Earth that hostile aliens had been abducting humans for years. The broadcast lasted only minutes before Cathara technicians managed to cut the signal. But the damage was done. For the first time since the hunts began, Earth would know what had happened to their missing people. Commander Vorthik realized that the situation had spiraled completely out of control. The human resistance was no longer just a threat to the arena's operations, but to the entire Cathara policy of secrecy regarding their activities on Earth. In desperation, Vorthik sent another message to the Cathara homeworld, this time requesting not just military reinforcements, but permission to destroy the arena, entirely if necessary to prevent further intelligence leaks. The response came back within hours and brought news that chilled every Cathara on the station. Admiral Corvex, one of the most ruthless military commanders in the Cathara fleet, was being dispatched to restore order. His reputation for crushing rebellions was legendary throughout Cathara space. When Jake intercepted this communication, he knew that the war was about to enter a new and more dangerous phase. The casual hunt had become a serious military conflict, and the humans would soon be facing a professional soldier rather than amateur hunters. But Jake also realized that they had already accomplished something remarkable. They had turned a hopeless situation into a fighting chance, transformed victims into warriors, and proved that humans would not go quietly into extinction. Admiral Corvex was coming to destroy them, but Jake Morrison and his growing army of human fighters would be ready for him. The real war was about to begin, and this time the aliens would learn what it meant to face humanity at its most dangerous. Admiral Corvex arrived at the arena aboard a massive Cathara warship that dwarfed the space station. Unlike the sport hunters and facility guards, Corvex was a professional military officer who had spent decades crushing rebellions across the Chuzan galaxy. His reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded him. Jake watched through stolen surveillance equipment as Corvex inspected the arena and interviewed the surviving staff. The Admiral was a huge Cathara, even by their standards, with battle scars covering his armored hide and cold, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Within hours of his arrival, Corvex had completely reorganized the security operations. He brought in military-grade equipment, established proper patrol patterns, and began treating the human resistance as a genuine military threat rather than escaped prey. "This changes everything," Dr. Carter said as they monitored Corvex's communications from their hidden base in the forest. "He's not going to make the same mistakes as the hunters. He understands guerrilla warfare." Jake nodded grimly as he watched Cathara soldiers in full battle armor sweep through areas where his team had previously moved freely. The casual hunt had become a serious war, and the humans were badly outgunned. Corvex's first major operation was a systematic sweep of the entire arena using thermal sensors, motion detectors, and air support. The Admiral had correctly identified that the human resistance was using the artificial environment's hiding places to avoid detection. The sweep forced Jake's team to abandon their base and split into even smaller groups. Lisa and Pete, who had been with Jake since the beginning, were cut off during the evacuation and had to find their own hiding places deeper in the forest. For 3 days, the humans played a desperate game of hide and seek with Corvex's forces. Several members of the resistance were captured or killed, and Jake realized that they could not win a conventional war against superior numbers and technology. But Jake had one advantage that Corvex did not expect. Carlos had been studying the arena's construction during their weeks of fighting and had discovered something important about the station's power systems and structural weaknesses. The whole place is held together by a network of support beams and power conduits, Carlos explained during a brief meeting in an abandoned maintenance tunnel. If we hit the right spots, we could cause a cascade failure that would force them to evacuate. Dr. Carter immediately saw the psychological implications of the plan. If we make them think Earth has sent a rescue fleet, they might panic and destroy the arena themselves to prevent humans from capturing alien technology. Jake realized that this was their only chance. They could not defeat Corvex in a straight fight, but they might be able to trick him into destroying his own base. The deception required careful planning and perfect timing. Using captured communication equipment, Jake and his team began transmitting fake signals that appeared to come from approaching Earth spacecraft. They created false sensor readings that suggested a large human fleet was en route to the arena. At the same time, Carlos began placing charges at critical points throughout the station's infrastructure. The explosions would be timed to create the illusion of attacks from outside, while actually weakening the arena's structural integrity. The plan worked better than Jake had dared to hope. When the fake signals began appearing on Kithara sensors, Corvex immediately assumed that Earth had somehow developed faster than light travel and was mounting a rescue operation. Jake's intercepted communications revealed that the Admiral was genuinely worried about human technology falling into alien hands. The Kithara had been studying humanity for years and knew that humans had a dangerous tendency to reverse engineer captured equipment and turn it into weapons. Corvex ordered his forces to begin preparing the arena for destruction, rather than risk allowing humans to capture advanced Kithara technology. The Admiral's paranoia about human ingenuity was working in Jake's favor, but the plan came with a terrible cost. As Kithara forces prepared to evacuate, they began executing their human prisoners to eliminate witnesses. Jake received frantic communications from Resistance members reporting that guards were moving through the prison facilities and killing captives. Jake faced an impossible choice. He could continue with the deception and probably save Earth from future Kithara attacks, or he could try to rescue the remaining prisoners and risk exposing the plan. In the end, Jake's training as a Marine made the decision for him. No soldier left behind was more than a motto. It was a sacred duty that he would not abandon. Even to save his home planet, Jake launched a desperate assault on the prison facility, while Corvex's forces were distracted by evacuation preparations. Using every weapon and tactic he had learned during weeks of fighting, he fought his way through multiple levels of security. The rescue operation turned into a running battle through the corridors of the arena as Jake and his team tried to reach the prisoners before they could be executed. Carlos used his remaining explosives to blast through locked doors, while Dr. Carter helped coordinate the evacuation of freed captives. During the fight, Jake came face to face with Prince Juthrax's younger brother, Prince Vorthik, who had arrived with Admiral Corvex to avenge his sibling's death. The young Kithara was even more arrogant and reckless than his dead brother, but he was also faster and stronger. Their confrontation took place in the arena's central control room, while alarms blared and evacuation procedures continued around them. Prince Vorthik fought with the fury of personal vengeance, while Jake used every dirty trick he had learned in years of combat training. The battle was brutal and lasted several minutes before Jake managed to drive his knife into a weak point in the prince's armor. As Prince Vorthik died, he triggered a personal weapon that sent energy beams cutting through the control room's equipment. The explosion that followed knocked Jake unconscious and triggered a chain reaction that began tearing the arena apart. When he regained consciousness, he found Lisa Rodriguez pulling him toward an evacuation pod while the station shook itself to pieces around them. "Carlos didn't make it," she said grimly as they reached the escape pods. "He stayed behind to make sure the other prisoners got out." Jake looked back at the arena as their pod launched toward Earth. The massive station was breaking apart in a series of explosions that lit up space like a dying star. Admiral Corvex had gotten his wish. The arena was being destroyed to prevent humans from capturing alien technology, but the victory had come at a terrible price. Carlos was dead. Dozens of prisoners had been executed before they could be rescued, and Jake had no idea whether their message to Earth had been received or believed. As the escape pod drifted through space toward the distant blue marble of Earth, Jake wondered if they had won anything more than their own lives. The war between humans and Kithara was far from over, and next time the aliens would be ready for human resistance. The escape pod's emergency beacon activated automatically as it entered Earth's atmosphere, sending distress signals to every military and civilian monitoring station on the planet. Jake watched through the small porthole as his home world grew larger, wondering if anyone would believe the incredible story he and the other survivors would have to tell. The pod crashed in the Pacific Ocean, where it was quickly recovered by the United States Navy. Jake, Lisa, Dr. Carter, and the other 8 survivors were immediately taken to a secure military facility where they underwent extensive medical examinations and psychological evaluations. Jake found himself sitting across a metal table from Colonel Ryan Burke, a stern-faced intelligence officer who had been tasked with determining whether the survivors were telling the truth about alien abductions and orbital hunting. Preserves. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Colonel Burke said, reading from a thick file. "You claim that an alien species has been abducting humans for sport hunting on a space station for the past 3 years. That's correct," Jake replied calmly. He had expected skepticism and was prepared for it. "And you single-handedly organized a resistance movement that destroyed this facility and killed dozens of these aliens, not single-handedly. I had help from brave people like Lisa Rodriguez and Carlos Silva, who died making sure other prisoners could escape." Colonel Burke studied Jake's face for any sign of deception. "The problem, Mr. Morrison, is that we have no physical evidence to support these claims. No alien technology, no photographs, no proof of any kind except your word and the word of the other survivors." Jake had anticipated this problem. "Admiral, Corvex had been thorough in destroying the arena to prevent human access to Kithara technology. The aliens made sure to clean up after themselves. But the fact that missing persons reports suddenly stopped 3 weeks ago should tell you something. This was true. Government databases showed that unexplained disappearances in remote areas had dropped to 0 immediately after the arena's destruction. People who had been vanishing regularly for years had simply stopped disappearing. Dr. Carter's psychological evaluations of the survivors provided additional credibility to their story. All of them showed signs of genuine trauma consistent with prolonged captivity and combat stress. Their accounts of events matched each other perfectly, despite being interviewed separately. Most convincing of all was the radio message that Jake had broadcast from the arena. Radio telescopes had detected the transmission and recorded its contents, providing proof that someone had sent a distress call from outside Earth's atmosphere. Colonel Burke spent weeks investigating every detail of the survivor's story before finally reaching his conclusion. While he could not prove that aliens had been hunting humans, he could not find any evidence that the survivors were lying either. The decision was made at the highest levels of government to treat the alien threat as real until proven otherwise. Jake found himself recruited into a new military unit tasked with preparing Earth's defenses against possible future contact with hostile extraterrestrials. 6 months after his escape from the arena, Jake stood in front of a classroom full of soldiers teaching them the guerrilla warfare tactics he had developed during his fight against the Kithara. The students listened with intense focus as he explained how to turn superior alien technology against its users. "The most important thing to remember," Jake told his students, "is that no enemy is invincible. The Kithara thought they were superior to humans in every way, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to give up." Jake's survival manual became required reading for special forces units around the world. Military leaders recognized that if hostile aliens ever returned to Earth, humanity's best defense would be the same guerrilla tactics that had destroyed the arena. Lisa Rodriguez joined Jake's training program after recovering from her injuries. Together, they developed survival courses that taught soldiers how to fight with improvised weapons and limited resources. Pete Collins, the former engineer who had survived the longest in the arena before Jake's arrival, helped design new communication systems that would be harder for aliens to detect or jam. Dr. Carter established a research program focused on studying alien psychology and behavior based on her observations of the Kithara. Her work helped military planners understand how different species might approach warfare and what tactics would be most effective against various types of alien enemies. But Jake knew that their victory had come at a terrible cost. Carlos Silva, and dozens of other prisoners had died in the arena, and their sacrifice could not be forgotten or ignored. Jake made sure that every soldier he trained understood that the price of freedom was often paid in blood. The Kithara had also learned from their defeat. Intelligence gathered from radio intercepts suggested that the aliens had classified the arena incident and convinced their government that the humans had died in an unfortunate accident. But Jake suspected that some Kithara leaders knew the truth about what had really happened. Admiral Corvex had survived the destruction of the arena and returned to the Kithara homeworld with a new understanding of human capabilities. Jake's intercepted communications indicated that the Admiral was now preparing his species for the possibility that humans might someday develop interstellar travel and come looking for revenge. The hunter had indeed become the hunted, but the larger war between species was only beginning. Jake spent his days training soldiers and his nights wondering when the Kithara would return with better preparation and more serious intentions. On quiet evenings, Jake often thought about Carlos Silva and the other humans who had died fighting for their freedom in the arena. Their sacrifice had given humanity advance warning about the alien threat and time to prepare defenses that might prevent future abductions. The memorial wall in Jake's training facility bore the names of every human who had died in the arena, along with a simple inscription that captured the essence of what they had accomplished. They refused to be prey. As Jake looked up at the stars each night, he knew that somewhere out there, the Kithara were planning their return. When that day came, humanity would be ready for them. The species that had once hunted humans for sport would discover that their former prey had become the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The war between humans and aliens had only just begun, but Jake Morrison and his fellow survivors had already proven that no enemy could defeat the human spirit. They had turned victims into warriors, prey into predators, and defeat into victory against impossible odds. Earth was no longer a hunting preserve for alien entertainment. It was now the home of a species that would fight to the death rather than submit to any enemy, no matter how powerful or technologically advanced. The Kithara had taught humans that they were not alone in the universe, and humanity had taught the aliens that some prey fights back.